Hello and welcome to Veterans Medals Workshop. Glad to have you here today because today we have a great show. We're going to talk about miniature medals. We'll touch briefly on the fact that miniature medals are mainly worn on active duty, guard, and reserve formal mess dress uniforms, and I'll show you examples of that. But mainly we want to take a look at what's appropriate for veterans to wear miniature medals. They look particularly handsome on a black tie event like this tuxedo. And I'll show you other variations in the appropriate way to wear miniature medals. So, come on. Oh, but before we go, let me take just a moment and review the bidding on, well, full-size medals, miniature medals, ribbons, and mini ribbons. Mini ribbons? Yes, I think you'll enjoy seeing them too. Come on, let's go. Military decorations and medals come in a number of different variations. And if you start in your upper left, hold on, let me get the little pointer here. If you start in your upper left, the basic medals are made out of a mixture of bronze with very exact specifications issued by the Institute of Heraldry. A number of the armed forces allow anodized or gold-plated variations of the medal, which are very handsome. Now, in your upper right-hand corner are the miniature medals of the size issued during World War II and right after World War II. In this variation of the Navy Veterans medals, you can see they're a little closer to half size. Today, the miniature medals below for Marine enlisted personnel from World War II, they're a little smaller, and you can get them in both bronze, as shown in the very top, or in anodized or gold-plated. At the very bottom are variations called mini ribbons, and these are ribbon racks that are made up of ribbons from miniature medals. I first saw them on, I believe General Marshall in World War II was the first to use these. They also come with magnets, so they're very easy to put on a lapel of a business suit, for example. So that's enough background. Let's go take a look at miniature medals and how veterans today can wear them. Oh, and I'd like to point out that the medallions on the miniature medals and the ribbons are identical to those of full size, as you can see by comparing these naval medals. But today we're only going to talk about miniature medals and how veterans would wear them on different civilian clothing. Today the armed forces use miniature medals to wear on formal dress, mess dress, or ceremonial uniforms. Starting on your left is the example of an artillery officer wearing his miniature medals on the lapel. This naval officer is wearing them on his left breast. The Marine officer in this variation of the formal uniform is wearing them on his left breast. This Air Force non-commissioned officer is not wearing them on the lapel, but on his left breast. On the left of your screen is how an Army officer would wear his miniature medals on a mess dress, on the lapel. And on the right is how this officer would wear his miniature medals on a tuxedo, on the left breast just over the handkerchief pocket. So whether you're wearing a single-breasted or a double-breasted tuxedo, you would normally mount your miniature medals on a bar, and they would go just over the pocket, the top of the pocket. Now, you could, on a very wide lapel like this handsome jacket, you could mount them on the lapel like a number of the branches of the military service do. Either way, your choice on that. What you do not want to do is get a long bar like this, because then it's just too difficult to mount them, and it doesn't look good because you've got to go through the lapel and through the jacket. So avoid these long mounts. What you want to do, if you're having more than one row, then you mount the first row just over the breast pocket, and then the second row you mount just over them so that the gongs on the bottom row show. Not like this, more like this. So I'll show you some more examples of that. Here's a nice example of how this Vietnam veteran mounts his miniature medals on his tuxedo. And you can see that the top row does not cover up the medallions of the second row. Another good example is one of this Air Force non-commissioned officer wearing his miniature medals on his tuxedo. And you can see in the left background that was generally how the Air Force non-commissioned officers wore their mess dress miniature medals. I'd like to make an interesting point here. For many years, the Air Force had very strict regulations on the use of anodized metals or gold-plated metals. And you can see in this case, this Air Force officer had a set of bronze miniature medals. However, once he is a veteran, he can have them gold-plated or anodized. Using these Air Force anodized metals starting in the upper left, I would like to point out that mounting bars for miniature metals come in availability for 1 metal, 2 metals, 3 metals, or as shown in the upper right, 4 metals across. If you want to mount more than 4 metals on a normal 3 3/8 inch bar or 4-inch bar used by the Marine Corps sometimes, the rule is that they cannot overlap by more than 50%. And the inboard metal must be on top of all of the outboard metals. So as you can see in the lower right example, just thought you'd want to know that.
So here are a couple of other really nice examples. For example, on this handsome white dinner jacket, which you could wear in the summertime or a special event, you mount the medals the same as before over the left breast pocket, lining them up so when you're standing up straight, they're straight, just as you would on active duty. Now, if you're a member of SAMS, the Scottish American Military Association, and you might wear a Prince Charlie coat at a formal function or a black tie function, you'd find that the lapels are large enough on a Prince Charlie coat to put the medals onto the lapel, somewhat like the Army does on their mess dress uniform. And here again, same rule if you have more than one row. The bottom row always shows at least the gongs as you put the next row on. And I'll show you some other examples. And do you wear miniature badges? Well, only certain ones that you're really proud of. If you had the combat infantry badge, yes. The combat action badge, yes. The parachute badges, yes, probably I would wear those too. One of the things I would like to point out is that the Department of Veteran Affairs has published and actively supports veterans wearing their military decorations at all appropriate functions. That could be, well, certain dances or balls, military functions, funerals, unfortunately, yes, and any other type of patriotic affair. And the miniatures go well. And I'll show you a couple more examples. Hold on one second. If you enjoy these programs, please give us a like or even better, subscribe. I mean, really, it's a lot better for us if you subscribe because that'll keep us on the air. Okay, let's get back to the program. Let's take a look at two other variations. For many semi-formal affairs or even formal affairs, the blue suit can't be beat. And the miniature medals look particularly nice over the pocket handkerchief line. I think you can see here, especially if you could wear it with one of your appropriate military ties. And on a double-breasted blue blazer, and this particular Italian cut has very wide lapels, the medals go well on the lapel. And here again, I mentioned that if you're going to do multiple rows, the top row does not cover up the gongs or the medallions of the bottom row, and that's how you want to do them.
And here's a really great example of a Marine Iraqi veteran wearing his military medals on a more informal basis on the lapel of his sports coat. And depending on the event you're going to, this is really appropriate also. I mean, come on, you've earned them. Wouldn't you look a lot better wearing them to a certain events rather than just a lapel pin? I mentioned earlier that most mounting bars are 3 3/8 inches, and that allows for 4 metals across. The Marine Corps uses a 4-inch bar sometimes, so you can mount 5 metals across. But if you're going to overlap, same rule, cannot overlap more than 50%. Using female Marines as an example, you can mount medals 1, 2, 3, or a 3 1/4 inch bar can mount 4 medals across and overlap up to 8. Basically, remember this, when you order your miniature medals, they will mount them automatically at 2, 3, or up to 4 abreast. But if you have up to 8 medals and you want them all on one bar, they can do that. They can just overlap them not more than 50%, and you can have up to 8 medals on one bar.
By the way, one thing I'd like to mention that if you're ordering miniature medals, my recommendation is to get the ones that are anodized or gold-plated because After a while, the regular bronze ones will start to tarnish. Now you can clean them, and even a pencil eraser will clean them up, but I highly recommend the anodized or gold-plated ones. They're only a few dollars more. If you have any particular questions, call Metals of America and ask to talk to one of the veterans there in the call center, Kenny, Scott, Chris. They know their business, and they represent the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps. Let me show you something else. It is kind of interesting because there are times when you might not want to use the miniature metals. And you could use what we call mini ribbons. And the first time I saw that was an official portrait of General Marshall in 1945. And instead of wearing all of his full-size ribbons, he had them mounted as miniature ribbons based on the ribbons from the miniature metals. So here you can see some examples that's pretty neat. They go right on the lapel. And the nicest thing about it, I mean, what's really neat is, let's see, oh, yeah, you don't need pins or anything because they pretty strong magnets. They come with magnets. And so all you do is line them up, bam, get my finger out of there. It's pretty neat. So if you think you'd like some mini ribbons along with your miniature metals, it is kind of nice to have both, call the guys at Metals of America and they'll take good care of you. All right, until next time, thanks for watching Veterans Metals Workshop.
Don't be the guy who wears a handkerchief instead of his miniature medals. I think this looks a lot better than a handkerchief in the pocket. Almost all of this information came from our book, Military Medals of America, available for you on Amazon.